live. Do I start? Yep. Yeah, look, 23 people here already.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to week 2, block 2 of our sampler quilt along. Thanks for joining me today. What a better way to spend a snowy Northern Ontario afternoon as sewing with a bunch of buddies. Speaking of buddies, I am actually tickled pink on how many people are joining us. Our Facebook group has 123 people that have joined it. I'd love to know where everybody's from. So maybe post it when you post a picture of your block, just put where you're from, the city, whatever, just so it's kind of neat to see. One thing before we start, I'm just got my cup of tea here. I'm just going to move that out of the way. So this is the block right here that we're going to be doing. This one here is block number 2. So, but before we start, I just wanted to talk. Somebody had mentioned this cute little design board that I have. You can see the back is just foam core. I have a piece of batting on the front binding. So if you would like to make some of your own, I have like 6 of them and I love them. I can pre-cut out things for my patterns. I can stick my blocks on them for each, maybe one board for each unit, and then have a multiple different kinds of boards.
And I think we made ours 13 inches.
We made ours. Yeah, they're 14-inch square. And I bought the foam core board from the dollar store. So if you go on to Lori's channel, so Lori Holt is Bee in My Bonnet, and she's made a wonderful design, video on this board. Some glue gun, and some old binding, and you're good to go.
We have a hello from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, hello. How's the weather in Wisconsin? I think you get snow down there too, I think, eh? Alrighty, so let's move forward. I'm going to get on. So here is, I hope you've already downloaded your instructions for today. I don't know. Let me just see if I can hold this up a little closer to the camera instead of her having to move it. You can see that I drew some arrows in here, and I'll be showing a little bit more later on. And that's the direction that I'm going to start pressing my seams. I'll explain why I'm pressing them in this direction as we go. So let's do some cutting. So I'm going to cut my blue fabric today on screen. Oh, let's talk about fabric choice first, maybe before we even cut. So my block, what I wanted to do is have it a little backwards than what normally is. Because a lot of times you think the back fabric has to be the light. So this time I'm doing the background fabric in a darker color. And I am going to be doing the shape in the light color. So this block is called a churn dash, and I believe it's also called a hole in the barn door. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is it. I think it might also be a monkey wrench. So if I'm wrong, just let me know. But I think they're all that. But for today, I'm calling it a churn dash. So Tiffany wanted to up hers a little bit. So she has decided that she's going to use 3 fabrics. And we will show you hers after the fact, and you can see what she's done. So to make this block, or the tools that we need today, will just be a rotary cutter, a friction marker. We're going to need some kind of marking device for our half square triangles, and a square to square up. I'm also going to be using my block lock. So let's start cutting. So the first thing that I want to do with my fat quarter is make a nice straight edge. I want to cut a strip to do the strip piece blocks. So that's what I'm going to do first. So I'm just going to flip this around. Normally what I would do is walk around the other side of the table or flip my board. I just don't want to bang the camera. So I'm actually going to just move my fabric this time. What I want to do is take one of the lines on my ruler and I'm going to put it on the selvage edge of my fabric. So it's lined up perfectly on the selvage edge of my fabric. You can see because this is a cut edge over here. Tiffany, that's backwards.
Yeah, look, backwards, yeah.
So they're going to be cutting. So it looks like I'm cutting with my left hand.
Yeah, for them online, it'll look like you're cutting.
So then all the lefties that actually have never got a demonstration on their cutting methods. So this way, they're actually going to get it and you have to, how come it's backwards?
I don't know why it looks flipped on.
Did it do that last time too?
Yeah, it did that last time
really?
too.
Okay, I just learned something. Sorry, I'm digressing.
Just a camera.
Okay, so I have the solid line of my ruler on the selvage edge because I know that's straight. The cut edges, I don't know that they are straight. So now I am going to cut myself a straight line. Here's the thing when you're cutting with strips. If you cut past your hand, you could literally move your ruler and it'll shift on you. So we don't want to do that. So again, I'm lining up my mark on my ruler that I have a little bit of fabric on the outside of my ruler that I'm going to trim off and make it nice and straight. The way I like to cut is I like to have my hand flat on the ruler to give it stability. I take my little finger and I tuck it just at the edge. So what that's going to do is support the edge of my ruler from sliding, but it's also going to ensure that my thumb's not close to this edge. So I'm not going to cut it off. These rotary cutters can be very sharp. So again, just like we talked about last week, I'm going to make sure that my cutter is straight up and down, but I'm going to cut as far as my hand. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to make sure that I'm holding my cutter straight. It's butted up against my ruler, so it's going to support my ruler from moving. And I'm just going to walk my hand up here just a little bit. Cut, cut, and cut. So my ruler didn't slip. I've got a nice straight edge that I can cut my strip on. So now I'm going to flip this around.
Oh no! Someone says they got a cut on their finger with their rotary cutter today.
Oh, I hope it's not bad. I know there's some people that have ended up with stitches. So according to our instructions, we needed a strip that was at least 20 inches long and 2.5 inches wide. So I love to use the ruler on the full inch side. Works better with my brain. So I'm going to find the 2.5 inch mark. If you want, and side of the ruler, you can see now my numbers are in the right direction so that I can read them. So then I know that this is the 2.5 inch mark. Because you have to be careful that you don't use the white numbers that are upside down. It'll throw it off. Clear as bud? I just like using this one because I know it's a full inch, 2 inch, and then there's the quarters and there's the half. So I'm going to align my 2.5 inch line all the way up my fabric. And again, the same as I did last week, I want to make sure that that mark is on my fabric, not beside my fabric. And then I'm going to cut this one exactly the same way. Baby finger supporting my ruler. I'm going to cut, cut, and cut. And just like that, we have a 2.5 inch strip.
So Sherry says it does look like you're cutting with your right hand. So I guess it flips it back on the stream for them.
Oh, good. Perfect. Thank you, Sherry.
And she said it's her first cut in over 20 years, so not too bad.
Oh, good. Good. So this ruler, I could cut my squares with it by using the end, but it's just a little awkward. So I have my ruler here, whether it's a 6.5, 1.5, it really doesn't matter which one I want, which one I'm going to use. Again, I could start myself off with a nice straight edge. So let's just do that. Instead of cutting all of them, I'm just, again, going to align my ruler on the edge of my selvage. So you can see this one, the strip is really crooked. So I have to move it over. So I have fabric on the outside of my ruler. I am just going to give myself a nice straight edge, and I jiggled. And there you go. So that's what I'm going to base my squares off of, is this nice cut edge. I'm going to take a line of my ruler. I'm going to again put it on the edge of my fabric, and I'm just going to trim this square off, or I'm sorry, this side. So now, do you remember last week where we took the square and we cut two sides? We had to flip it around to the other one. I have two really nice, sharp, straight sides. So that's where I'm going to base my squares off of. So I need, according to my pattern, I need two 5-inch squares. So I'm going to align the 5-inch square here and the 5-inch square there. Again, support that corner. I'm going to cut here. I'm going to cut straight up, placing it against the edge of the corner, roll back, and cut. One. Again, as you're cutting, sometimes because we're human and because fabric moves, as we're cutting, sometimes my lines won't line up anymore. Not a problem. It happens to everybody. I'm just going to make another straight edge again. It usually happens when we have to adjust our fabric. That was a really bad cut.
So now you're going to have to adjust that straight edge again.
Oh, no, I went this way. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly. So there's my 5. And now I have to cut a 4.5-inch one for the center. So because I messed up, you can see I'm really off on where my 4.5 is. So I'm just going to move that over. So my 4.5 is on that fabric. My 4.5 is lined up here perfectly. My lines are on top of my fabric. I'm going to cut that one. I think I was awkward because of the camera. Now, because this is my perfect corner, I'm going to rotate that from the upper right to the bottom left. Four and a half. So I just have to trim off this one crooked side. There we go. So I've got squares for my half square triangles, the center, and the strips. One thing about the strips, because I'm using a fat quarter bundle, I have the length that I need. Some of the ladies, I know that you're working with scraps. So I would keep the color consistent. I would like it to be like our background, all the one color, and then our the dark or the light, whatever, and then this another color, but keep the back consistent. That way our churn dash will glow, or it'll jump off that fabric and it won't blend in. We'll get to see the marks.
We do have a question. Someone asked, do you ever stack your fabrics, or is this a new quilting?
I do stack my fabrics at certain times. Let's just see if we can turn the mat over. If I was trying to stack, or I usually, if it's real full a length of fabric, I will definitely fold it in half and cut that way. If per se I was cutting a whole bunch of 2.5-inch squares, cut my strips. I don't personally usually line up a lot of fabrics one on top of the other, I find that they shift and I don't get perfect cuts. But I definitely cut, excuse me, is this a full piece? Yeah. So I definitely have them folded in half so they fit my full ruler. When you are lining them up, again, making sure, I don't know if you can see this. If I line my edges up and you can see the bottom of my fold is not hanging straight, I want to adjust my layers. I have my fingers in between the layers of fabric and I am going to adjust them back.
It's not a great fabric to show on because it's so dark.
Dark?
Do you want to grab
Let's
the
light
lighter
one.
blue?
Sure, we can do that. Okay. So say we got our fabric from the store and we lined up the tops. They were nice and they didn't hang straight. How's that look?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I just shift the tops back and forth until they hang absolutely straight, now I can place them down. So I'm going to have this perfect fold here. That will be my new straight edge. And I won't be cutting boomerang strips. So if you've ever done that, that was because your fabric wasn't folded perfectly in half. And that you ended up getting an angle, but down here. So now you can see that even this one that we were cutting on, it doesn't match up perfectly. Now what I would do is I would take a line, put it on my fold, trim that edge off so it's perfectly aligned up. If I had to cut a whole bunch, say 2.5-inch squares, I will cut them faster by stacking my fabric. But if I had 3 or 4 layers of fabric and I stack them all like this, it's a lot to cut through and things shift. So what I like to do is this is the one time that I use the lines on my mat. I will take a strip. I will align it up with a line on the mat. I will take my second strip and I will go down the 1 inch, or the first one's usually at 1/2 inch. But again, I will line it up. Let's pull a full one here on my mat. 2 reasons why. So now if I was going to cut 2.5-inch squares, I can take one of these joints, make sure everything is staying nice and straight. Even if I had 10 strips on here, I'm only going to be cutting through about 2 or 3 layers at a time. And everything stays nice and straight. So then I will cut my 2.5-inch strips that I need or whatever. Alrighty. So back to our block. If you are doing it scrappy and you don't have a piece of fabric that's 20 inches long, not a problem. What you are going to need are 4 2.5 by 4.5-inch strips. So you will be able to cut them in that method. So let's go on to our half square triangles. Just to recap what we did last week, it's one of our most common blocks. I think I buried my stuff. Again, we're going to use our 5-inch squares. I am going to, again, with friction markers. I love friction markers on the back of my fabric, even if there is a little bit of residual left after. It doesn't matter because it's on the back of my fabric. So you can either draw the 1 line or you can draw the 2 lines. Just for speed, I'm just going to draw the 1 line. I am going to layer them right sides together. Did you turn on my iron? Mm-hmm. I remembered that I turned my sewing machine on and I set my stitch length back to 2.0. And off we go. Needle down so I can flip this around, sew this other side. Because I have a little bit of fudge room in my blocks, because we're going to be squaring these up, I can just put the metal to the pedal to the metal and sew nice and fast down that strip. Cut this one off. Flip this around. Even if you noticed, even as I'm sewing really fast, I never let the fabric just slide through my hands, because then I don't have control. I want to make sure that that toe of my foot is right beside my 1/4 inch line. Sorry, my center line. Alrighty. So now I'm going to sew these in, or sorry, I'm going to cut these in half. And then we are going to press. Remember I said last week, rule of thumb would be pressed towards the dark. This is one of the times when we are going to break that rule. Can you see this here like that? Okay. So I want to press my seams towards the light, because what I'm going to be doing is pressing my seam allowance towards the inside of the block. I am not going to have such a big bulky buildup of fabric on the outside. So I am going to press towards the light. Again, set my seam, open it with my fingers, just to recap what we did last week. And I've also grabbed and press on top of each other. I just make sure, oh, my steam's on. Let me just turn that off. Am I pressing towards the dark? I am.
Towards the light.
We want to press towards the light. So I'm going to reset my seam back. So you can see the rule of thumb. We always press towards the dark, or most of the time, and I got mixed up. So because I want to press towards the light, I'm going to have my light on the top. Seam. Press. If I'm going to press another piece on top, I just want to make sure my seams are not butted up too close to each other. And then I can press a few units without moving them. Your corner. There we go. Let's trim those up. Again, my favorite ruler to use for this process is the block log. When I have a quilt and I'm doing a ton of blocks, I will orient them into 2 different piles. One with the seam going in one direction, one with the seam going next, and then I'll power cut. So I'm going to grab for my first pile. I'm going to align. Oh, whoops, my ruler's backwards. This way. Towards my white. Make sure that my seam is going in the right direction. Again, making sure that my seam butted, or my groove in my block lock butted up to my seam with the corner on the seam allowance. Okay, so I am going to cut this side, this side. I don't have my rotating mat, but I still want to just rotate the whole unit. I'm going to slide it down. These are squaring up according to our paper at 4.5. So I'm going to cut. I'm going to cut. Now, because this is in the same orientation as that, I'll put that beside that tile, pick this up. Now, when I grab my ruler and put it on there, it's already orientated in the correct direction. So I just have to do these two sides. I love finding little tricks that help my brain not have to think so hard. Rotate, slide it down. And that goes on that tile. So I put it beside this one. So this is my next one. You would laugh if you know me, because sometimes I feel like I'm the most disorganized person in the world. But when it comes to my piecing, I love having all the little tricks that keeps me organized and in the right direction. Makes our job a whole lot easier. Any questions? We're good today? Again, this is just a recap. Rotate, slide down. Again, my line goes on top of my square. Trim, trim.
I haven't been telling you, but a bunch of people say hi.
Hi. So there's my half square triangles. I'm just going to put those on my design board. And let's go along to the strip. Couple tips when you're sewing strips. This machine is absolutely wonderful. The Fafs have what we call an IDT. So it is basically a built-in walking foot. It's going to grab my fabric at the top and at the bottom at the same time. I am going to line up my fabric. Now remember, they're two different pieces of fabric, so they're not necessarily going to be the same exact length, because I just cut it off of my half square or off of my fat quarter. So if I'm going to pin this, I want to just lay them down, not stretch them, align them up so they're nicely lined up. I'm going to put a few pins. I don't normally pin, again, because of the IDT, nothing shifts. But if you've ever sewn a couple strips together and you found out that they were a little wavy, it's probably because one of your strips, your top strip is shifting. And this is a way that you can make that not happen. You can perfect it. So I've got my salvages on there, which are just fine because I'm going to cut those off at the end when we're trimming. Alrighty, so let's start sewing. I'm going to sew up to my pin. I'm going to take the IDT off just to see if I can get my fabric to shift a little bit for you. I'm going to take my pin out. I want to make sure that this piece of fabric in between where my needle is from my sewing machine and my pin stays within that area. So it's sewing pretty good. But I do want to show you, let me just pretend that it's not. So if you start to get a little pucker on the top, so you can see that there's extra fabric on the top. What to do again is stretch this out a little bit and get that ball in the fabric within this area. I want to make sure that I'm going to lock it in with my fingers on the side, and then I am going to sew up to my pin. So that keeps all that fabric where it's supposed to be. If I let it shift, got a pucker, just pull the pin out, let the pucker go down, all of a sudden my ends aren't aligned up, my pieces aren't aligned up, and things are going to get a little waffly.
You didn't put your IT back on.
Oh, that's right. I'll put that on for after. Again, if you have a little bit of bulk on the bottom, you can hold your strip like this, roll it up. And off we go. I am going to press this seam towards the dark because it really doesn't matter on this one. Here's another little tip for you. Can you see this?
Sort of.
Okay. I drew a line on my mat. When we're pressing a strip set or a strata, other people have called it, we want to make sure that we don't press curves into it. It's very easy to do. So I have taken a Sharpie marker and I've drawn a line on my mat, on my board. My ironing board over there has one. This little one doesn't. There is one here, so I can put even the bottom of my strip on that, just so it stays nice and straight. I'm going to my seam. And now I'm going to open it up. Okay, making sure my seam allowance stays in the direction that I want it to. I don't want to iron. I don't want to squish it like this and then end up finding that I can see my stitches or catching it with the edge of my iron. I just want to press. But I'm making sure that that seam allowance doesn't have any foldy overs on it. I want to make sure that it's open all the way. Alrighty, so now at this stage,
we do have a question. Diane asks, if you have a walking foot that you can put on your machine, can you use that instead of pins? Do you need the pins?
You can use a walking foot. You just have to make sure most sewing machines don't have a 1/4 inch foot for their walking foot. So you would have to adjust your needle. Check out the YouTube video on my YouTube video on how to perfect your 1/4 inch seam. So if you have a normal wide walking foot, you can definitely use those, but then you have to put tape or something down on the bed of your machine where you can align up the edge of your fabric so you'll have that perfect 1/4 inch seam. Alrighty, so just before I cut my pieces, I just want to test my seam allowance and make sure my strip is 4.5. So my 2 1/4 inch line would be on the seam. I have got perfect on this edge. Looks like this strip might be a little too big. I am going to double check. Let's check this end. My 2 1/4 is on my seam. There's my 4.5. There's my 4.5. Good to go. It's a little bit crooked, just the way it was lying. I think taking some time and straightening it. Whoops, 2 1/4. We're good to go. It's a little awkward. I'm finding it just a little awkward to cut with my sewing machine here. So what I want to do is cut our strip into 4.5 inch lengths. This edge is really wonky, so I'm going to make sure my 4.5 is somewhere on my fabric. I am going to put my straight line.
Can you explain a little more about putting the 4.5 line on your fabric?
Sure. So,
just to make sure we're clear on that.
Okay. So instead of taking my strip, I could very well do that as well and put a line of my ruler on my seam and give myself a straight edge. And then I can flip my strip back over and things go wonky, especially if you're using like multiple strips. So what I like to do, instead of that, saving some time, I find the 4.5 inch line that's on my ruler. I want to make sure that there is trim off space along the whole edge. So then I can cut this side. I can take this strip, this piece, flip it around. Now I can put my 4.5 inch line there. And I can trim this off. So it's exactly 4.5. Now that one strip, remember I said my blue strip was a little bit too big. If it would have been too small, I would have had to check my seam allowance. This time I'm going to cheat just a little bit. Because it only has one seam in the block, and our block is measuring 4.5, half of that is 2.25, and that's where my seam has to be. My 2.25 inch mark has to be right on my seam. And then I can just trim off that top. So now when I put my 4.5 on the edge, my 2.25 is still right there on that edge. And I am perfect. Little way to cheat, but only on this block. Most blocks we can't do that with. So let's just cut. Now my edge is nice and straight because I've already cut a block off. So I can put my 2.25 inch line on my seam, my 4.5 inch line on my fabric, and I'm good to go. 2. Everything again is lining up. 3. And again, my strip is a little bit off here. I want to make sure that this line is straight. If it has gone crooked, no worries. Just move your ruler over a little bit. We can flip this around. Now we've got another straight edge again. Our 4.5 inch line is now again on our fabric. My 2.25 inch line is on my seam. And I can trim. And if I have to, I can trim the little edge. Now we have all the pieces, the units that we need to finish our block. These out of the way. So, looking at my diagram, I want to have my white corners pointing in. My solid block is in the center. And I am going to take my strips, and my monkey wrench is light on this, so I have the light one on the inside.
Your monkey wrench?
Monkey wrench, churn dash, same thing, same block, same block. So there we go. So we make sure that it has that circular shape that's in there. And all we have to do now is sew our rows together. Just like last week, I always like to start on my left. I read from left to right. We've learned like that since we were in kindergarten. So that's just the way my brain works the best. So I'm going to take the one on the right, close it like a book, and this is the seam that I want to sew. I can pin these, or today I'm going to live dangerously and I'm going to show you how I pin with my fingers. So this corner here is aligned up perfectly. I've got a lot of bulk there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a leader, and it's going to take care of my tail ends for me, my thread tails. So I'm going to start sewing. So I've got this lined up perfectly. Made sure that it went over that seam. I could have also started from this side if your machine is cranky with the seams. I am going to make sure that my corners are lined up perfectly. And now I'm going to hold that with my finger. I am not going to let it slide whatsoever. It will not let go, and that's how I'm pinning. It's with my fingers. I'm going to hold the seam in the direction that I want it to be, make sure my lines, my edges are all aligned up, and off I go. My finger's getting in the way now, so I'm just going to hold it. I've lined it up. It hasn't shifted. I'm going to hold it with my finger. My left hand is going to guide my fabric all the way along without moving.
Sorry, I tried to answer a question about Sharpie ink, but someone asked if Sharpie ink would transfer to your fabric, but then they said they wondered if steam would activate it again. So I'm wondering where you're using this Sharpie ink.
You can use ultra fine Sharpie to draw the lines on the back. Once you press it with the iron, it's heat set, so it's in there permanently.
I thought they meant to draw the 1/4-inch seam line that on your, because to draw your 1/4-inch seam line. So that's what I was answering, was drawing on your sewing machine. So I'm not sure where they are drawing.
Okay, so if you do use a Sharpie instead of the friction marker, if you use a Sharpie on your fabric, it is heat set. It doesn't come off. The steam will not reactivate it again. It's permanently in your fabric. So if you have darkish fabrics, it's fine. If you have really light fabrics, even if you have seam allowance, remember that if there's a line underneath there, it could shine through. But I have used Sharpie in a pinch on darker fabrics.
What we are using is a friction marker. It is a heat erase marker. So it actually is with the heat.
Yeah. I can show you that. So you can see that it marks really dark. And then if you hit it with the steam, with the heat, it totally disappears. Now, that being said, if...
Oh, Sharpie on the wool mat.
That's on the wool mat? About. Oh, okay, yeah. Sharpie's a permanent pen. Okay, perfect. So it literally, once you start steaming and stuff like that, it's permanently, and it won't come onto your fabric. Again, make sure that when you line it on, give it a good steam without fabric there, and it will set right into your mat. My fabric.
Sorry, I understood the question.
Alrighty, so I've got my first piece in there. I'm going to go to my second piece. Again, right to the left. Aligning my corners. My edge is nice and straight. My thread broke. That is strange. Give me a second here. Only on live all this stuff happens. You know that, eh? Put my IDT back on. Okay, so because I picked it up and put it back down, I'm just going to double check to make sure I know what side that I am actually going to be sewing. Align my corners. Needle in the down position. Okay, again, the joys of this machine, you can see that my foot came up a little bit. so I can align my corners of my next piece. I can butt them right up to my needle where they want to be. You might have to lift your foot a little bit just to align them up perfectly to the edge of your 1/4 inch. Off you go. Locked and loaded. I'm just going to make sure that my corner's lined up here. Pin it with my fingers. Now there's 2 ways that I continue on right now. I could take this right out of the machine, lay them all back down on my mat, or I can go to my chain because I have 3 pieces. I know the first one is my first row. I can clip that off. Clip off my leader. I can lay it down, grab my next block, and sew this line. There's many ways to sew the blocks together. You are going to find one that works best for you. I'm just giving you some ideas of how you might try to do it and then find which way that you like the best. I'm going back to the beginning. My center was the solid. Again, the goal is just to keep your edges so they don't slide, so all your block edges line up as best that we can. And at this point, I can, here's my leader. Whoops. Put my leader in there. And I am going to cut my 3 rows apart and grab my ironing mat. At this stage, these are the seams that I want to press now. And I should have marked those darker for you. I should have used a Sharpie marker. So because I want our seams to nest nicely when we are sewing our rows together, I want to press in opposite directions. Because I know that my next block that's going beside this, our alternate block, that my seams are going to be going inwards, I want this seam to go outwards. And so the outside ones are going to go in the outside direction. This one's going to go in the inside direction. So you want to make sure that they're opposite. So these ones go out. These ones go in. This one goes out. So this is our first strip. Again, I want to make sure that they're going out. So I'm going to place my outer block on top, set my seam. Because I have a corner here that has that bulky seam, I want to make sure that it's going to stay in the right direction. I like to flip my strip over. Again, so you can see that this is the top. This one folded up on me. It's not going to match up because you can feel the bulk. It's not that big of a deal, so I'm not going to fix it. It'll be just fine the way it is. This will still be in our seam. But these are the ones that will be butting up against other seams. I want to make sure that they go out. You can see if I sewed absolutely perfect, we're going to have that 1/4 inch in between the edge of our block and our point. So when we sew this block into our next block, we're not going to lose those points. So there's my first block. My center, I want to press towards the center. So I put my center down, press, press. And again, I'm pressing away from the center. So I'll have my center on the bottom, my edges on the top. Making sure that that corner goes in the direction that I want it to go. So now that I have my rows together and I'm going to sew these together, I always pin match my seams. I want to make sure that they stay exactly where I want them to be. Again, because I press the center in, the outer edges out, my seams are going to butt together very nicely. Pin that seam. Again, a lump. I'm going to roll it, making sure that it's nice and smooth with no gap. I can pin this corner. And this one I'm just going to line up and put in my machine. We're trying to let the camera focus a little bit before I go on. Just hopefully it'll be a little clearer. Alrighty. So even if I have a pin, those edges can shift. So I want to make sure that those edges are aligned up with the block behind it, underneath it perfectly. So up to my pin. Move my pin. Again, I just sew past my seam, align my edges, and off I go. Making sure my seam's going in the right direction. Again, I can press this seam. Again, remember, I want this edge to be going out. So I am going to press that away from the center. I could have sewed the other side on this and then went to the ironing board, but it's just as easy to do it one at a time. Again, let's match our seams. They nest together really nicely. And remember, it's not a race. We're supposed to enjoy the process. And I do like all stages of it. I love pressing my new fabric that I just purchased for a project at the first. The cutting, it's all supposed to be enjoyable. Again, there's that seam underneath. You've seen me lift the fabric. That's because it wanted to catch on the lip of my sewing machine. I always want to make sure that it's going in the right direction. I know that I will eventually have to unsew things, but I do want to unsew as much as, or as least as possible. Whoops, that's my cutter. I just noticed something that I'm surprised that my daughter didn't notice and didn't give me trouble for. I'm going to show you something. I usually use the ergonomic rotary cutters that have a blade lock on it. So as soon as I let them put them down, the blade goes in. This cutter does not, and I forgot to close it. That's an extremely, extremely dangerous thing to do. As I grabbed it to go cut, I could have grabbed the top. I could have seriously hurt myself. I used to laugh because when I was a Girl Guide leader, when I was working with them, we always told them that if I ever caught them with their blade open and laying on the table, I would slap their fingers. And if they ever caught me with my blade open on the table, they got to slap my fingers. One little girl did. She went to go reach for me and slap. I told her, no, that's the rules. So she slapped my fingers and giggled, and we never forgot to close our blade again. This is the one that I was talking about. This is the blade that I use most. It's more ergonomic. It's easier on my wrist, but it has the lock. So I cut, lay it down, and my blade is safe. Even if I do grab it, it's not going to cut myself. And we can also lock it closed so it's safe in traveling. Each work, whatever you like. Okay, so here we go. Here is my block for today. So you can see most of the time when you've ever done this block, it's always been a dark on the inside with the background being light. I thought I would switch it up and do it differently. So with Tiff's fabrics, when she was looking into her bunch, she decided to go totally different than what mine is. So you can see she went back to a light background and she used two blues, one for her corners and a little bit darker for her strip set block. That's the nicest thing about quilting, that there's that artistic license, and you can take these blocks and you can make them your own depending on what your fabric tells you to do, depending on what you have and what your brain wants you to do. So everybody can have at the end of the day.
Thanks, Linda and Leanne. I had fun making it.
So thank you for joining me today. Was there any questions before we go? Was there something?
Any more questions, anyone?
We love reading the comments.
Oh, I will scroll back up to the top and I'll do this. Hello from Louise Henry, from Deborah Weaver, from Linda Bourne, from Sherry Commission. Hello from, oh, I said that one already. It is snowing in Eyre. It snowed 3 inches today in Wisconsin.
Oh, wow. I love sewing on a snowy day.
Hello from Camp Quilter. Hello from Martine. She caught us live today.
Awesome.
Hello from Barb and Viv.
Martine started a little late, but she's caught up now. So that's always great. And that's one of the best things because they're going to be on the YouTube channel for a year. So if your buddy finds out about it, there's not a problem where they can catch up. They can go back, watch our videos, and start at any time.
Leanne says hi from snowy Manitoulin. Val Letford said hello. She finished hers early, though, so I think, or was that a different Val? No, Valerie Brill finished hers early and left.
Because I'm chatting a lot and trying to give you so much information, the block does take me a little bit longer than it would if you were just sitting and sewing. But I do really love that you are sewing along with us and not just grabbing the pattern and sewing. It's always a joy to sew with our buddies, even if it is virtually.
Oh my goodness. Hello from Wichita, Kansas. She dropped in at lunchtime, but she'll be catching it later on.
Awesome.
And yes, it will be up. It will be posted still. Sue says hi from Massey and love the variations. Hi from Brenda in Chelmsford. Any other questions, everyone? Anyone?
So it was nice hearing from you all. And as we go, the blocks will get a little progressively a little bit different. I'm hoping to be able to show and share something new with each block. So on that note, we're going to go put the link on our Facebook channel. And we're going to make sure that this goes up properly on YouTube to be there for everybody. So in the meantime, stay warm. Hopefully you don't have to shovel too much, and happy sewing. Bye, all.